Awesome. We're going to kick it off here. Thank you so much for coming. We're really thrilled to have you here. Jeff and I, maybe you are not surprised, are really excited about your interest in writing a BPC plan for your NSF proposal. And so we're here to try and demystify all of that, try and help you out. You'll see, so our plan for today is that my colleague Jeff Forbes is here from the NSF to talk about the BPC initiative at the NSF. And then I'll be walking you through some resources that are available on bpcnet.org. I think you're gonna find these super helpful. And then we're gonna save a ton of time at the end for Q&A. You're also welcome to type Q&A into the chat. Okay, so diving right in, again, thank you for coming. Please keep yourself muted. And I will hand it off to my colleague, Jeff.
Thank you, Colleen. And I just wanted to really thank all of you again for participating in this. This is really an incredibly important and great opportunity for the computing community. And we're really excited to get all of you working on broadening participation in computing. Right? In the past, it's been like, we've had a lot of great activities. You know, some of these are pictured here where, you know, particular projects are working on, you know, what can we do in order to help move computing forward in a lot of different axes, but thinking about diversity and inclusion and thinking about, you know, who gets to participate in computing. But what's key about this initiative is it's not just about some people doing it, it's about saying, let's make this as part of what the work that we all do. And let's also get all of the good ideas that come from not just the people who focus on BPC, but actually all the researchers who know how computing works more broadly. So I'm here to talk about the BPC Plan and NSF's, you know, how we got here with the pilot. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know. This is on behalf of a great team. There are a whole lot of folks who work on this. I want to give a particular shout out to our leadership, Margaret Martinosi and Erwin Gianchandani and Gurdeep Singh have all been really supportive of what we're doing, and really they make this all work so that, you know, we can actually do this. But this is an all of CISE effort. It's unusual in that respect, that basically, since the core programs hit almost every, will certainly hit every division, but also hit almost every program officer, we're really having to work with everyone on this. Okay, so next slide. All right, so how do we get here? So back in 2012, in trying to consider how do we actually make a difference, right? There have been lots of BPC efforts over time. And I don't want to say, like some people say, we haven't made a difference. I mean, if you look at the graphs, I mean, I can give you lots of data that, you know, things have improved, but definitely not at the rate that we would want or expect. So we realized that we can't just keep doing the same thing. It's going to take more than good intentions or business as usual in order to reverse. That key word is long-standing underrepresentation. One of the questions we get asked a lot in NSF is how computing is different, and it's the long-standing and particularly hard to fix underrepresentation. So we need, you know, focused and sustained efforts on the part of many, or really much all, in the computing community. So how do we get there? The way that our advisory committee proposed that we should do this is by, let's actually make broadening participation part of all of what we do. So we want to have the inclusion of BPC efforts as an accepted and expected part of the research award portfolios. And how do we do that? Well, first, we make some requirements. We're going to require meaningful BPC activity. And we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by meaningful in what is an expanding set of CISE programs, right? So that we, you know, start with basically the biggest projects and then move down. And then we want to provide support. It's not just enough to tell you all to do it. We want to actually provide support. And that's support for the PIs who are submitting, but also support for the people who are trying to review, and also for the program officers who are going to have to deal with all of these plans to broaden participation in computing. And then you need the third leg of the stool, which is you actually have to review what happened, right? If someone proposed something, did they do it? right? So we want to provide feedback on the plans and require reporting in annual reports. Next slide, please. So what was our vision? So our vision is we'd like to get to the point where all research proposals include a meaningful plan to broaden participation in computing, and they actually do it, right? So the quality of the plans gets better. The amount of review of feedback that you need is going to be less and less because this is an accepted and expected part of research. And the plans are implemented, and importantly, these lessons are going to be shared. It's not just one person does something, but you want this to be shared across. One thing I say to anyone who will listen is novelty is nice in research in general, but in BPC, if there's a good activity, do it. Like, we don't give extra points for novelty. We would much rather see you build upon something that we know works. So we have a group that's just had a meeting with this working group that's monitoring, supporting the progress of BPC. And also the idea is there are different people who work on things. There's CISE researchers and people who do more BPC work. We're going to have more collaborations, and we want to have some measurable progress towards actually diversifying the workforce. We're keeping track of that in a lot of indicators. So I think the next slide will go into what the 4 things are. Yes, so there are 4 different ways we can do this. The ones that people tend to focus on the most tend to be research activities. So you're proposing some kind of technical research. So you say, well, what I can do is I can broaden participation as part of my research. And that's reasonable, but that's not what you have to do, right? But if you are going to do that, you want to do that in a way such that you're giving the right kind of support to the students who are working in that. So CRAWP runs a program called DREW. So that's Distributed Research Experiences for Undergraduates. And what you can do is you can apply to be a mentor with DREW, and they will send you, well, if you are matched, you can apply to be, to work with 2 students each summer, for example. And you can fund those students. And those students, and the structure matters, because it's not like we're just going to say, we're just going to send you 2 female students and good luck to them, right? It's that that there'll be a selection process both for mentors and for students, and also that there's accountability built in, right? You're going to have to post what you've done and publicly, and like how much progress they've made. So on the diagonal, the other thing that we see a whole lot of are outreach activities. So as faculty, apparently we all think that we should go into elementary schools and high schools and middle schools and get the next generation. And that's possible. But what I would also encourage you to do there is don't do that on your own. Unless you have some particular expertise and connections, chances are it'll be very difficult just to even get students to come. But what you can do, for example, is the Girl Scouts are interested in having people teach computer science with their Girl Scout troops. And there are Girl Scout troops everywhere in the United States. So by working with them, you can actually create an activity that, where you're going to actually get an audience, but also where there's some sense of sustainability, and also you can measure it. But I'm sure Colleen will also strongly encourage you to consider the other 2 quadrants, because these are places where you can actually make an impact and you have expertise. So one is faculty development. If you're a faculty member and you're proposing to do some broadening participation in computing activity, why don't you focus on yourself, right? One thing you can do is, for example, peer instruction is a pedagogical technique that actually is shown to have good impact on students underrepresented in computing. And so how do you do this? Well, there are tools that you can find for learning how to actually adopt peer instruction in your own courses. But simply doing something for your own development, for your own courses, that counts, right? That's BPC, right? You don't have to go out and find new students. You can work with the students that are already sitting there in your class and do better by them, and that counts. Another thing you might also want to do is you work in a department. Can your department become in itself a better and more inclusive culture? So NCWIT, the National Center for Women and Information Technology, they have NCWIT 101, where you as a department can create a plan for student recruitment and retention. How do you bring students in? How do you bring particular female students in? And how do you retain them, right? So it's not just enough to bring students in, but you don't want to bring people in and then have differential retention. So those kind of resources. All the links here go to BPCNet, which Colleen is going to talk about later in this discussion. All right, next slide. There are a lot of other resources. I want to, in particular, note the resources that my cluster funds, the NSF Broadening Participation in Computing Alliances. So there are 8 alliances, and these are national resources for broadening participation in computing. And why is that important for you as someone writing a BPC plan? Well, by working with these groups, that means you have these resources that have a reach, that they can help you actually reach your intended population. And also they can help you with making sure you have evidence-based practices and that you're able to actually assess and measure the impact. Because as we'll get into, a key thing for your BPC plan is not just to do something, but know what you did and know how well it worked. And there are 8 alliances that span the curriculum, span all levels of educational pathways. For example, Real CS focuses on high school, and ESEP focuses on K-12. But then you also have IMCS, the Institute for African American Mentoring in Computer Science, focuses primarily on PhD students. Or CASI, which does undergrad and grad students, Access Computing, which addresses persons with disabilities throughout the pipeline, et cetera. So I really encourage this. Another thing to consider is if you're looking into K-12, we have the CS for All Consortium. So bringing all together everyone who's trying to work on how do we get engaging computer science into the classroom. And we have a community practice for teachers called CS for All Teachers. Next slide. So what we've learned in having lots of people submit plans is we really want to have a stage of development way of thinking about it. So we know that right now, a lot of PIs are not going to be in position to develop or execute an ideal plan that will have an evidence-based, sustained response, and this is a key thing, to a well-articulated aspect of broadening participation. Your job is not to solve all problems as a PI. Your job is to find some particular well-defined aspect of that you want to address. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we get people, a lot of PIs are going to be getting started, but we'd like to get them to evolving or hopefully eventually get everyone to impactful. So next slide. How do we measure that? We have the 5 elements of a meaningful BPC plan. So the first one, context. So we want to know what the plan is addressing in your local situation, right? So what's the local data for where you are? Everywhere in the United States, you have some students from one of our 5 underrepresented groups, which I just realized we did not put on the slide. The 5 underrepresented groups for the purposes of BPC are female students, the students identify as female, African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Native Alaskans, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders, and persons with disabilities. Those are the groups that we know have a long-standing documented underrepresentation in computing relative to their participation in education in general. So you want to describe what the situation is where you are. And wherever you are, you have some people from that group, right? Everywhere in the United States has women, right? Everybody's like, we've checked. Similarly, you've got the context of your place, but then you also want to say, well, what is the problem you're going to work on? So you're going to specifically identify the demographics of the participants, including the underrepresented group and level. So you might say, I'm going to work with African American undergraduates at my institution, or I'm going to work with female high school students in the area. Then you need to say what you're going to do. That's your strategy. And your strategy is a set of activities with some kind of outcomes and that actually correspond to whatever context you're in and the population you're trying to do. And the key thing is every PI has to have some role. So PI or co-PI has to have a role in whatever activities you have. They don't have to have a role in all the activities, but every PI has to have a role in at least one activity. Then there's preparation. So preparation is saying, well, what's your prior experience? Well, do you have any prior experience? If you don't have any prior experience, well, what kind of training activities do you have to implement your work? So if your plan is that you're going to get 5 new students from an HBCU, do you have any previous experience working with students from HBCUs or African-American students in general? That's fine if you don't, but at least try to address how you would get preparation so that you can make sure that they have a good experience. And finally, and certainly not least important, and a place where people fall down a lot, is making sure that you have some plan to know, did I do well? So how are you going to measure the outcomes of your proposed activities? Next. So to learn more about how to make an individual plan, you go on to BPCNet. BPCNet, which Colleen will describe, has particular information for individual plans. So in terms of individual plans, there are different templates that you can use so to get you started. And it's so key that if you just follow this template, you will make your BPC reviewers so much happier than if I have to go find what those 5 things are otherwise. So the solicitation specifies the 5 things it's supposed to have in it. And we will have a new solicitation out soon, and a core solicitation, and I should tell you we'll still have the same thing. So our strategy, what we're trying to do is we want to review proposals and provide high quality feedback on your BPC plans. The important thing for you to understand is that that BPC experts review your plan separately from the rest of your proposal. But that review does not impact the overall rating that you get, nor does it affect your award recommendation. However, your project, if your project is awarded, you have to have a meaningful BPC plan at the time of award. Meaningful meaning that you need to make sure that you can really satisfy all 5 of those elements that we mentioned before. Next, please. So how did we do? To just give you some context, so so this is the 3rd year. We're just entering the 3rd year of a 3-year pilot. In the 1st year, we had 75% of projects submitted included a BPC plan. Remember that they need one. They need a plan at award time, but you don't necessarily have to have one at when you submit. But we highly recommend it, and most people do. In this past year, we had almost 90%. Now, we're not there yet in terms of everyone being impactful. 60% of the plans that we received were at the lowest level, which is getting started, but 33% were evolving and 7% were impactful. We wanted to move so that we can get everyone in that direction. That's why we're having this training today. All right, next slide. So why did so many people end up as getting started? One common problem is you confuse broader impacts and broadening participation. Broadening participation is a kind of broader impacts, but there are a lot of things that are broad impacts that are not broadening participation. A canonical example is you're going to do outreach, but that outreach is not focused on any particular underrepresented group. So if I run a math camp, that's a great idea. That's something you should do, but that does not mean you're doing broadening participation. One thing to do is you are increasing participation, but you're not clearly broadening participation. Like you want to show what the particular demographics are of the population that you're trying to serve, right? And what those are locally and what you're doing at your institution to keep them in there. A big thing is everyone trying to be novel, but instead, if you can build on best practices and existing efforts, your plan will be shorter and better, and that's a good thing. Having each PI not have clear roles and responsibilities is another problem. And then you need metrics, because right now, I'll tell you, we are basically at the stage where we're starting to review some of these annual reports, and you need metrics because it's a key part to show in your outcomes, how did you actually do? So you need some kind of metrics. Another thing that people will sometimes do is they'll say, here are all these PhD students I have who are from some underrepresented group in computing. but you need to give us some context. Like if you had 2 female students and you've had 100 PhD advisees, I mean, that's better than 1 or 0, but that's not great, right? And we also want to know, like, what were the recruiting and mentoring strategies that you did that got you there? Did you just do business as usual and you just got lucky, or was it something particular that you did? Next slide, please. So where we're at now is what we're trying to do is bring everyone up to a higher level, raise the baseline. And one way to do that is by encouraging institutional efforts to address broadening participation in computing. And the way we do that is by having units create their own departmental plan. So given the departmental plan that says, here are the things our department's doing, and then PIs can write their own plan saying how they're going to contribute to that. And the key thing is by having departmental plan, you get sustained cultural change, and through like the broader infrastructure of a department, assessment of impact. Next. And now it's Colleen, who will tell you how these how these work together.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. And I assure you that Jeff will interrupt me if I say anything that he disagrees with. Do you know what I mean? So welcome again. I'm Colleen Lewis. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I was previously at Harvey Mudd College, and I'm excited to tell you about BPCNet.org. We've been working really hard behind the scenes. This is a CRA-led effort funded by the NSF, and I want to walk you through some of the stuff that's there to help you, to help guide you through this process. The first piece is I want to draw your attention to something that people tend to find pretty confusing. Is there's 2 types of BPC plans. One is for your NSF project, so that's going to be what are all the PIs doing. You're going to submit that to the NSF. They give you at most 1 to 3 pages. Every PI, like Jeff mentioned, has responsibilities, and it can link to your department plan. And normally links in the NSF documents are a no-go, but your individual plan that you submit with your project to the NSF, you can include a link. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, I've got department plans. And these, like Jeff was mentioning, are about coordinating these sustained departmental BPC efforts. These are about 2 pages, that's the goal, and they're including some of that same stuff about goals and activities and data. We are imagining these as 5-year documents, but that you're updating them every year or every 2 years so that you've got runway to help PIs create a plan to submit with their NSF proposal, but they're also helping you, you're continually updating it to make sure that you're addressing a problem in your context. And these plans can be submitted to BPCNet.org for, we also are going to be having consulting available. Because you've signed up for this webinar, you're going to receive emails about all that, but you can get feedback on those plans. Okay, so on BPCNet.org, I encourage you to go check it out. We've got resources specific to writing individual plans and writing department plans. In general, on BPCNet, what you're going to see is rubrics, templates, and NSF requirements for the individual plan, rubrics and templates for these department plans, some events like we have today. That's where the video from today's recording will be posted. We've got an FAQ. You got a place to submit your departmental plan, and then these resources, which is a curated set of BPC advice. So as Jeff showed, we've got these templates for the BPC plans. These templates are not required, but what we did in creating those templates was try to directly map to the NSF solicitation. So I shrunk down Jeff's text from the NSF solicitation, and that's on the right-hand side. And you can see the template on the left-hand side. So it should be really easy for a reviewer to see, yep, they provided all the information in this NSF solicitation. Now, it's really key that this template is not required. It's just a resource that the community, i.e. BPCNet.org, has provided to try and help PIs create effective, impactful, and well-reviewed BPC plans. The activities of a PI, the PIs on a project team, they can be disjoint. So like Jeff mentioned that the activities do not need to be novel, they can also be disjoint. One PI can work with the Girl Scouts, one PI can use Drew and advise summer research students. And so with that, each PI, for each activity, you might replicate this template. So I copy and paste this template once for each of my activities. Okay, So I want to address some pitfalls, and I think Jeff already hit some of these, is that a lot of faculty will assume that BPC activities always include outreach to K-12 students and sending students to diversity-focused conferences. And these are great activities, but the question that you want to ask yourselves as you're picking your BPC activity for submission with your grant is, do these take advantage of the faculty members or my skills and spheres of influence? And so if you don't have any K-12 experience or know anything about working with K-12 students, that's not going to be a place where you're going to be super impactful potentially. And so I want to talk you through some strategies where I think you can be really impactful. So one, Jeff already mentioned, improving your pedagogy. That's the ways in which you teach. And we've got great research reference on BPCNet explaining how improving your practice is better for all students, and then additionally better for students who identify as underrepresented in computing because of their race, gender, or first-generation college status. So there are things that you can do that are for all students, but actually still count as BPC. And the key piece is that you include that research base that explains why you're doing this. You can revise your curriculum. So one of the pieces that we recommend is that you assume that students have a multiplicity of interests and that you can address those in the curriculum. You can improve departmental policies. I think we have a lot of departments we have a lot of departments that have a competitive enrollment process where students have to have had high school computer science to be successful in the major or to even be able to be a major. But if you look at the country, access to high school computer science is unequally distributed by race. And even within those schools where computer science is offered, women are less likely to report being encouraged to take it, and they are also less likely to take it. And so the extent to which our campus policies disadvantage students who haven't had high school computer science experience is amplifying an existing inequity. And so a BPC activity can be like, hey, I'm going to change our department policy so that we are not amplifying existing inequity. And as Jeff mentioned, even just you and helping your colleagues learn about BPC, that can be a really important activity to pursue. And these first four, I'll mention that they are easily sustained. Once you change your pedagogy, you're probably going to stick with it. Once you change your curriculum, you're probably going to stick with it. Two more, expanding research opportunities. Jeff already talked about that. And then monitoring BPC data. So this is one maybe surprises people, is that an activity, a potentially very impactful activity, can be monitoring the BPC data at your institution. What are the retention rates from CS1 to CS2 disaggregated by gender and race? Okay. So on bpcnet.org, we've got resources for you. I've shown here selecting BPC activities. On that page, we've got a bunch of different types of activities. So you see focused on retention and then outreach and recruiting. And as an individual faculty member, I encourage you to focus on the ones where your position of power as a faculty member allows you to be more impactful. So thinking about curriculum pedagogy, data within the department policies, etc. And on BPCNet, you're like, what are all those categories, Colleen? I'm so overwhelmed. We've got a little description of those categories. You're also going to be able to find for each of those categories, like expanding research opportunities, we have a hand-curated list of resources. If you know of other resources that we should be posting, there's a contact us page at the top. But these are a set of resources that might be really helpful for you. So Drew was one that we already talked about, but here are some other ones. You're also going to be in the position to be writing a goal for your BPC activity that you're submitting to the NSF. And on BPCNet, under resources, and then at very bottom, example BPC goals, we have 37 example goals for you to get a sense of the different types of things you might do. It's not just K-12 outreach. It's not just sending students to diversity-themed conferences. So hopefully reading through these is helpful for expanding what types of things you might do. All right, so we're wrapping up our planned portion. We're going to transition to questions, but I want to talk you through an easy path to a BPC activity. So that's download data from your context. So at bpcnet.org/statistics, we have a way for you to download your institutional data It's collected by the national government and is available through iPads, but iPads is miserable to work through with. And CRA made a tool, bpcnet.org/statistics, to try and make that easier. I'll show you that in a second. And then we have example plans. If your department has a departmental plan and there are ways that you can just plug in, that's great. But if your department doesn't have a department plan and you need something to do, you can look at some of these example plans that are following that template. So you're going to download your context data. So here you can see that I've selected the state of Utah, the institution, University of Utah, the bachelor's degrees. So I can select each of the different degrees. And then the data is all disaggregated by race and gender. And then it shows me both my state and national averages. So this data is all pulled for you. It's much easier to get here. You have no excuse to not include this data in your plan. Like, click on that. Like, you can click these buttons. Do that as your first step. As a second step, that link, that tiny URL that I provided, provides example BPC activities. These are ones written with the template. We have 5 right now. I want us to have 100 2 weeks from now, and that's wildly unrealistic. But we are going to continue to expand these set of example BPC activities. Like Jeff said, novelty is not a goal. You can copy and paste these, but I want to draw your attention to an important piece. Each of these activities explains what a PI would have done to become prepared to do this work. And so, you know, if you're working with the Girl Scouts, you need to get a background check, and you should get that background check and see what curriculum you might be teaching to Girl Scouts before you submit your plan. So make sure to pay careful attention to that preparation section, because it promises that you've done things that right in this moment you probably haven't done. Okay, so if you have a department plan, they are going to be better positioned to support you. But if your department doesn't have a BPC plan, I want you to download your context data. Colleen wants you to download your context data. Click and look through some of these example plans. They may jog your memory or get you excited about something, and you are welcome to copy and paste those. And each of them includes references explaining why this plan is likely to be impactful. We have 2 more upcoming events. We have a departmental BPC plan workshop. Those are 2 full days where you're going to be coached to writing a BPC plan. And then we're going to have 1 more of these webinars focused on individual plans. And we might change individual BPC plans to be called project BPC plans, because we're really trying to keep up at bpcnet.org. And so we're doing user studies at the same time as we're trying to drive traffic. And a common confusion is like, what, individual? But I have 10 co-PIs. So we're working on continually refining that. And because you signed up for this webinar, I'll be sharing that information with you. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can email me. And it's available at bpcnet.events. Okay, so now is our time for questions. The first question was, when will receive an email about setting up an appointment with a BPCNet consultant? Great question. We're trying to roll that out pretty soon, and you will definitely get an email because you registered for this workshop. And you can also go to bpcnet.org, and there's a mailing list. And if you join that mailing list, you'll be the first to know, like, oh, I can sign up for consulting appointments. Okay, question, Aaron. Do the activities in the individual BPC plan need to be related to the activities of the NSF proposal? It's like we paid you to ask that question. That's a great one. Jeff?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't. Yeah.
Yeah, they do not have to be. That is literally, I think, well, if it wasn't, it's in a new fact that will be released soon. But yeah, the answer is no.
Yeah, and it's on the FAQ on the bpcnet.org. Great question. Okay, should costs associated with BPC activities be included in our NSF proposal budget, or are they expected to be funded internally?
That is another great question. You can ask for funding beyond the stated budget limits from NSF, from your program officer at award time for your BPC activities. So if that means if there's a $1 million limit for whatever track you're in, then if it costs another $50,000 to do your BPC activity, you can request that. That doesn't mean you'll get it, but that you can request that. You'll need to have some justification for it, but absolutely, if you're going to do something as part of your BPC plan, NSF is or CISE is reasonably committed to fund that.
Yeah, okay. If we have a departmental BPC plan with many goals, should we only list the goals related to this individual BPC plan? I think so.
Yeah, you can answer that. I assume we have the same answer.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, the answer is yes. So the idea with these departmental plans is they're 2 pages, get reviewed by bpcnet.org, not submitted to the NSF, but there actually might be a shadow document that provides additional details of how a PI uses that department plan to create a plan that they submit to the NSF. And likely, and they're welcome to copy and paste things from their departmental plan, but likely they won't include all the goals. And it might just be distracting and like annoying to reviewers to see all the goals. They just want the context and goals that are relevant to your project. So if you include a little bit of extra context, that's probably fine, but really making sure that you do a good job of articulating what are the roles and responsibilities of your PIs, what's the data that informs it, what are your goals.
And that's why it's relatively important that your department plan be somewhat modular, so that you, like, the context stuff can be general, but like what you shouldn't list a whole bunch of activities, for example, that you're not participating in, because that can be confusing.
Yeah, another question, with a multi-institution proposal, can we make activities a simple sum of individual activities at each site without any connection between the sites?
Yes.
Yeah, and even for PIs at a single institution, they might each decide to do different things. Jeff and I are one institution, or not, but we're one institution, and I'm going to fix departmental policies, and he's going to adopt peer instruction. They are unrelated. The context and goals might be completely disjoint, and that's not a problem. Just make sure that each activity is motivated by context, provide the explicit goals, PI responsibilities, measurement, etc. Okay, if we are focused on only a single demographic, say women of all races, presumably, they should, then should our context only cover that demographic, or should it cover all groups? Jeff, you want to take this one?
You only need to focus on the demographic that you're focusing on. Now, you might want to make some argument for why you focused on women and not something else. Like, for example, if you're, anyway, you can imagine places where someone might say, they're at this institution where it's a Hispanic institution, but they decided to only focus on women. You might want to give some context for that, but it is absolutely okay. You get to pick who you focus on, and you do not have to do all groups at all. You get to pick what you do.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's nice to do, particularly because it's available at bpcnet.org/statistics, is to disaggregate your women by race. When you have that data available, disaggregating the women by disability status, particularly because sometimes when we are in diversity and computing efforts, we talk about women and we assume only white women. And because people have multiple dimensions of their identity, particularly race and ethnicity, and potentially a gender identity, it's really important to disaggregate when you have the data available. So I would say if you've got the data available, you might only disaggregate by women because that's really your primary focus. But I think that disaggregation is helpful. I want to ask about scope. How do we know what's the right scope for a PI's activity?
So the official answer, of course, is, the judge of how compelling your plan is always, it's up to the reviewer. Right? We as NSF program officers do not make that decision, that determination. But I think what's key is the scope should be reasonably proportional to the size of the project as well. So, you would expect that if you had a large collaboration saying that what our goal is to get like one extra female graduate student, seems kind of minimal, right? So you want to say, given the context that we have, given what we're trying to do, what kinds of impact can we have? But it's measurable, real impact of what we're looking for. So there's not necessarily an expectation that you're going to do something huge. Does that answer your question, Colleen?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And I think also the extent to which if you're coaching other PIs, or if you yourself are thinking about activities, is thinking about what are activities where you can make an impact long-term. So revising your curriculum where maybe it's a heavy lift this semester, but it really helps you sustain it. It might even get your colleagues interested in adopting those practices.
One question that comes up is if I'm at a women's college or minority serving institution, like, am I allowed to focus on like the students that are there? Yes, right? There's nothing wrong with doing a female focused BPC plan at a women's college, right? Now, that said, you can't just write a plan that says, I teach at a women's college and say that's a good BPC plan. I will tell you that plans of that kind generally rate very poorly. So you still have to address all the elements, but you do not have to like go out and do something different than what you have at your institution.
Yeah, something I find often is that the department demographics are quite different than the institution. So your institution might be, say, a Hispanic serving institution, which I believe the national designation is if a quarter of your students identify as Hispanic, then you are classified as a Hispanic serving institution. But saying, oh, we're a Hispanic serving institution, that doesn't mean that you have 25% Hispanic students in your computing department. And so being able to separate those and present the whole picture can be really helpful. But I think a really compelling argument is that the demographic of my institution is not reflected in the demographic of my student population. We're at 35% Hispanic students, and in the department, we're at 10% Hispanic students. And so we've got the students on campus, and we're gonna get them. Okay, we've got a question. When you say disaggregate, is it percentage of women of each group? Say, list the percentage of women who are Hispanic, or percentage of all students who are Hispanic females. I think the way people would be least confused by presenting it is treating the whole as the total number of students, and then saying what percentage do Hispanic women make up. That's my perception of what would be the easiest for someone to understand, but I'm sure that you could, we've got some numerate people reading your plan, so they'll be able to figure it out if you want to treat women as the 100%. Are PIs required to collaborate with the suggested organizations in designing activities? Great question. No.
But we hope that there's a benefit to, if we put people on BPCNet, well, we don't put, if BPCNet lists an organization, that there's some expectation that, one, they have some evidence behind what they're trying to do, and two, that they're well set up to actually assess and work with people who are not just from that organization. But no, they're not required at all.
Yeah, I think as an individual PI, the thing I'm least excited about is measuring things, and the extent to which you're partnering with these other organizations. Often they have a survey that you can send out, so you're not designing a survey. They might even analyze the data for you. So I think there can be really huge benefits. A lot of the partners also will help create a community of practice around people who are doing similar work, so that you can network and connect with other people who are doing this. Okay, we've got another question. For activities like providing research experience to underrepresented students, can the success metrics be as simple as X students are advised per semester, or should we also track the student's future career and measure how many students stay in the computing degree career? You want to take this one, Jeff?
So, I mean, the answer is it depends. It's going to be relatively difficult sometimes, or it might be out of scope, to do a longitudinal study of following what happens to all of your students. That said, saying X students were advised might not like invite, like, you know, what kind of experience are they having? Like, how do we know that like this is like been a good experience for them? Like, are they at least retained? Like things of that, having at least something that gets beyond, we're just counting numbers, but nothing about the quality of experience would be I think reviewers like seeing something about the quality instead of just the quantity.
Yeah, and so as a PI, I might explain the ways in which I'm using best practices for mentoring undergraduate research students. I might list the activities. Do you know what I mean? So I talked to, similar to the postdoctoral mentoring plan, thinking about like, oh, I might enumerate the number of students served as REU students, and I might enumerate my mentoring activities. And then I think that fills some gaps. Certainly at Harvey Mudd, I mentored students who then were underrepresented in computing, and then they went off to be physics majors. And I'm like, that's not bad, you know? Okay, are there data or statistics on participation categorized by computing subfields on bpcnet.org, for example, within HCI systems or theory? We currently do not have those data on BPCNet. Jeff, do you know of a location where we can find those data?
No, I don't. So I'm trying to think. Talby can tell you how many people graduated in the field, but I don't believe they tell you anything about the demographics of those.
We do have a link to the Talby report. So if you go to that resources page and search for Talby, it'll take you right to the most recent report, but I'm sorry to not know whether we've got that. The next question came in as a private question. Could you say a little bit more about the use of consultants? So bpcnet.org in a recent supplement or whatever from the NSF is going to be offering one-on-one consulting. So the idea is that there'll be a calendar of available consultants, and you can reserve time with a consultant to get one-on-one coaching for either a departmental BPC plan or for your individual BPC plan. And we just know that, you know, people want to do impactful work, and they might need support to do that impactful work. And so we really encourage you to sign up for that consulting. And again, we sign up for the mailing list on bpcnet.org, and we'll send you the information about that once that's live. Okay, I've got another question. For a multi-institution grant, do we describe the context of each institution all in one plan document? Oh yeah, and you are hitting on an important point, which is you only get 3 pages. Do you know what I mean? And so I think there's going to be some challenges there, and you might have to cut things that, you know, it's a tough call, but ideally you would have the context data that motivates each activity.
Yeah. Reviewers do understand that if you have, I mean, we have 4 or 5 collaborating institutions, or certainly PIs frequently. These are only medium-sized proposals that we review, mediums and larges. So we understand that it's challenging to get all that context out. But
yeah, and the other piece that's really nice about these plans that you submit to BPC plans that you submit to the NSF is you are allowed to link to departmental BPC plans. Do you know what I mean? So like we have these groups are underrepresented, data link. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? That you might not enumerate the details of it. Okay, are the department chairs expected to be involved in the creation of the BPC plan?
Oh, that seems like a question for the people who are running the BPCNet workshop. My understanding is to go to a departmental BPC workshop, they like to have some departmental leadership on the team that comes. An individual PI can write whatever BPC plan that they want. Now that's of course subject to your, you know, it still has to go through your university's Office of Sponsored Programs, but there is nothing that says because your department is doing particular activities that you need to participate in them, that you need to use your department's BPC plan. None of that is like, we are going to judge you based off of that. And then to your next question, I would encourage your department chair to attend the BPC departmental plans workshop, because it's really important that for a departmental plan to work, that it actually represent the department, not just I'm Jeff Forbes and I do these particular things in my department that I think are cool, so therefore I'm going to highlight those and completely forget about what my colleagues are doing. Part of the job of being in the leadership of a department is being able to understand and know about all the things that are happening, and also be able to connect to things outside a department, I think, which are often a missed opportunity. If you're in a school of arts and science, a school of engineering, whatever, there's chances are there's already an office that's dealing with a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I want to put in one more plug for likely there's a teaching and learning center on your campus that is happy to work with faculty to adopt inclusive teaching practices. And there's likely a diversity and inclusion office on your campus that is happy to work with faculty to expand their knowledge of BPC. They might not know too much about computing specifically, but a lot of the systemic cultural and structural barriers are not unique to computing. Okay, and then the second piece, BPC plans at the department level and creating that institutional change can be really most impactful if you have leadership involved. But right now, the BPC plan workshops for writing a departmental plan are virtual. So since we don't have to buy you catering, you can sign up. Do you know what I mean? And we're going to be excited to work with you and support you because, it's going to take sustained effort for all community members. And you might not have buy-in from your departmental leadership yet, but we'd be happy to talk to you in those workshops and try and help support you in getting to that point. We want you to have a whole team, and we're going to send you nagging emails to try and get more people to come with you because you're going to be more impactful if you can say, hey, everybody, the three of us faculty members or the three of us staff members, we wrote this departmental plan. Here's a first draft. Let's all take a look at it. You're going to be better able to accomplish your and our national goals of VPC if you bring a team, but we're not going to turn you away. Okay. Are there resources if PIs need clarifications, questions regarding feedback, comments they received in earlier submissions? Great question. I think you can talk to your program officers, and also the BPCNet consultants will be a helpful resource for that.
But yeah, the first place you would go there would be your program officer because they're the ones who sent that to you. To note that the program officer may not actually, in this case, have been involved in the BPC review, but they will certainly forward those questions on to whoever was.
I'm excited to be here with people who are excited about working on BPC. So thanks very much. I really particularly want to thank Jeff Forbes. This is the busiest time of the year at the NSF, and I feel so thankful that we've been able to have Jeff join us and talk us through these different components. And then we're going to continue to be writing and adding additional example BPC activities. So more of those will become available. tinyurl.com, then today's date, year, dash, month, dash, date, dash, BPC. Okay. Jeff, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for participating. I'm going to stop the recording and then I can stick around for another minute to answer any remaining little questions.